Hey everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. And we are rounding out an incredible month that we've dedicated to this theme of innovation, sponsored by Carasoft. If you missed any of those episodes, go back and watch them. You can catch them on AUVSI's YouTube channel. You can catch them on the Dawn Zoldi YouTube channel. And by the way, Lacey Ween from Carasoft, an article just came out in the AUVSI e-brief yesterday about that interview. So if you haven't read that yet, check it out as well. But today we have with us a continuation of the Volatus Above and Beyond series. This series is sponsored by Volatus Aerospace across the entire year. And today we have with us Craig Husselby from Synergy Aviation, who I met in Houston, Texas at the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit. So great to have you with us, Craig.
Thanks for having me, Don.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Craig, I know a little bit about you because now I've heard from you twice, but so many people out there don't. So, do you mind telling them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate the time. So I've my career has been primarily with oil and gas companies for 15 years. So earlier this year, I made the switch over to Synergy, and so like managing the pipeline surveillance and the asset integrity programs that we run. So the background that I brought forward from the aviation experience with the oil and gas companies, the kind of the cadence that they get along to with how they look after their programs. It's been a really seamless fit into the synergy team to kind of push forward what we've been working on.
Well, for those out there that missed last Thursday's Clubhouse with Maggie Schuster, where she interviewed Craig, it was a great interview. And Craig, you had mentioned that you kind of stumbled into aviation during your time with oil and gas. Can you tell us a little bit about how your time working in the oil and gas field kind of evolved into this aviation nexus?
Yeah, for sure. I was working for Shell Canada, working 2 weeks in, 2 weeks out in northeastern British Columbia, just doing logistics work. So dealing with the completions packages and drilling rigs to make sure they had everything that they needed to continue production. I ended up getting some work, or sorry, there was some work that came forward to us to start moving some crews in and out of the area. And so, in my role, I took it on. I ended up having a little bit of success with it, and then I got offered a job in Calgary, which is where I live now, to come down and manage Shell's aviation program. And so I did that for the better part of 5 years, and was got to work with some really interesting stuff. Everything from the offshore work that they do on the in Eastern Canada to pipeline surveillance to a lot of passenger movement. And so like from there, I kind of all of a sudden I was an oil and gas aviation guy, and it kind of had that. So it followed me around from Shell to Suncor to Pembina Pipelines, which I most recently worked.
And now you're with Synergy. So tell us a little bit about Synergy Aviation. What is it all about?
So Synergy Aviation is primarily uh, Synergy Aviation is primarily a pipeline surveillance company. So the pipeline surveillance that we do would be, like managing that asset integrity for our clients, all the way from the west coast of British Columbia and Canada into the southern parts of Ontario. So on a weekly basis, we cover quite a bit of Canada. Synergy is we're expanding into the United States. So starting within the next couple of months, we'll be fully operational, mostly operational in the United States from a fixed wing standpoint for pipeline surveillance. Synergy specializes in that pipeline surveillance with from rotary wing to fixed wing to UAV and drones. So we kind of do it all. Everything's in our basket of tools.
So Synergy was founded in 2014. And the focus here, as you said, is on this aerial surveillance with an emphasis on oil and gas and pipeline inspections. For those that aren't really familiar with the need for these pipeline inspections, can you explain how important that is to the O&G folks?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about pipelines, like they're generally they're under the ground. There are some above ground pipelines, but those ones you can physically see and get your eyes on it to see if there's any problems, leaks. Like where with the majority of the pipe or majority of pipe, it's buried under the ground. And so when we're doing pipeline inspections, we're looking for anything from overgrown vegetation that could potentially affect the integrity underground of the pipeline, to dead spots that could mean that there's a leak present, or some kind of an integrity issue underneath the ground. We look for erosion. Um, Third party activity is a main thing. If you think of a pipeline right of way being about 200 meters long, and it could be in the middle of a farmer's field, it could be in somebody's backyard. If they decide that they're going to go and start digging in that area without fully knowing and understanding the risks that are associated with it, like there could be some fairly significant problems. So the things that we do that are really important is, we provide a wide variety of weekly, monthly, biannually, quarterly, annual inspections of these lines to make sure that the companies have a view of their asset from 500 feet to see if there's any problems with it. So and Canada and the United States, a lot of this is directly mandated at either the state or provincial level. And so working in a regulatory atmosphere like that, you need to make sure that, not only the customer is getting what they needed from a regulatory standpoint, but that we're able to offer it and provide them with kind of solutions to anything that they need.
Yeah, so you mentioned the term risk, right? What are the risks, if a farmer's out there digging like right over that pipeline, hits it or something? Like, in other words, you mentioned a whole bunch of different scenarios, whether it's overgrown foliage, or where the roots might get into the pipeline and other things. What are the risks that could occur? What are the ramifications, I guess maybe is the better word, if something like that does actually occur?
Yeah, I think like the first thing that would come to anybody's mind would be a spill, right? Any kind of loss of containment of whatever the product is. Um, to kind of frame it, when you think of a pipeline, everybody just thinks of oil. So the pipelines that go under the ground, kind of all over the place, have anywhere from some carry gases, some carry like liquids. They could be that heavy oil crude, but a lot of them actually carry more than one thing. Like they may be transporting crude oil, but within that actual pipeline itself, there's additives that help it flow. There's like methane, propane, ethane, that would be present within it. So if you think about the loss of containment of any of those, like we're starting to get into some environmental risk. We're starting to get into some like risk to actual people, and the area around it. And so being able to view these areas, and like I mentioned before, there could be an instance where we're flying over the line, and either the technician or the pilot notices a dead piece of grass or a dead piece of vegetation that's out of the ordinary. And those are the types of things that we would then alert the producer of that, or the owner of the pipeline, to have them go in and check it out to make sure that it's safe, and they still maintain that integrity.
Yeah, you mentioned risk to people. I imagine explosion. I imagine health risks if there's some kind of underground leak that might get into a water system or something along those lines. And so you mentioned methane. And by the way, everybody, when I said I met Craig in Houston, it's because he was actually on our methane compliance panel at our very first LawTech Connect Energy Edition with the Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition 7th Annual Summit. So lots of rules and regulations around methane compliance in particular, both in Canada, in the United States, globally. It's a global issue. It's a greenhouse gas. So how does Synergy address the methane problem other than, you do these inspections, you said, for pipeline integrity, but what about for, kind of, I know there's a word for this, methane emissions, but that have escaped.
Fugitive emissions.
Fugitive, thank you. I knew it was like a weird term, like fugitive. So what does Synergy do as part of their portfolio that with regards to fugitive emissions?
So one of the things that we do, so while we're operating the pipeline itself, so we have a variety of different programs or kind of a la carte services that we can add to make sure that we're providing those services to our clients. So the first one, obviously, that we have is like HD cameras. Our cameras run 8K. Like the actual views that they have are amazing. Like the pictures that you can get from them, and we're only flying from anywhere from 300 to 600 feet, generally speaking, while we're operating the pipeline. So we're fairly close to the ground. So that's the first kind of area that we have. The second one that we have within our basket would be a 360 camera. So if you think of a 360 camera being like the aircraft or the camera on the aircraft, it takes a picture every 5 seconds. And so you're able to stitch those photos together, and you can look from the bottom of the aircraft, and in the pictures you can see the bottom of the aircraft, but you can get a complete view of everything that's available on the ground, move it. Because of the way that the camera works, you can zoom in extremely well. There's some pictures that we've had where flying over a creek, you can see the fish swimming in the water underneath it.
Whoa.
It's a super cool piece of technology. And then we go on to like gas leak detection that we operate. So we use the Boreal laser primarily from a rotary or helicopter standpoint. So that would be testing the amounts of gas within the air. And so we can detect up to about 3 or 4 parts per million, depending on the background gas that's in the area. Methane, we were talking about the methane problem. The methane problem, like some of the things that people don't really think about is methane can be produced in a very wide array of areas. So, cattle produce a quite high amount of methane, swamps, dumps, so landfills all create methane. And so it's being able to take the data that we get and separate it from the noise and say, like this is a spike in this area, so it's something to be that we should be looking at. And then we also have thermal cameras that we use as we're going along the pipeline, and any change in temperature is caught quite regularly or quite well from them, and we're able to pick those things up and make sure that again, that if there's anything from an integrity standpoint, that we can make sure that we that we're able to address it and quickly too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously key. And I imagine you mentioned some of the aircraft that Synergy uses, traditional aviation, fixed wing, piloted aircraft, as well as rotary wing or helicopters, and eventually migrated and added UAVs into the repertoire there. What are some of the challenges? You're talking about low-level flights. I imagine some of the environments might be difficult to maneuver through. Can you kind of walk us through some of that?
Yeah, for sure. So we have so the primary aircraft that we operate from a man's perspective would be a Cessna 172 and a Robinson R-44 helicopter. And so both of these aircraft are used fairly commonly within the surveillance methods. With any helicopter, you have to worry about weather conditions. So high winds, extreme cold, Like those things are definitely affect them. Like to be honest with you, like with my background working for oil and gas companies, the things that you kind of got to get across from them in both ways is, well, what an aviation company is doing is considered high risk work, low level flying, in a lot of cases, single engine aircraft. Like there can be a large amount of risk to that. Now, the risk when you take it into account, with what the deliverable is out of it, like you can mitigate a lot of those things. At Synergy, we operate with 2 pilots to make sure that there's always that kind of fail safe for it. Like making sure that we fly within the minimums and, like hit those targets that are not just the minimum standards for it, but like higher industry standards to make sure that that we can support it. And then like one of the, like over the past probably 3 or 4 years that has really come into our area within oil and gas is the use of drones. So we're able to use them, especially in situations where it may be too tight. You may have to fly too low. There may be some other problems that you would have for them. A drone is an excellent chassis to use in those situations to make sure that you can get what you need out of it.
Well, actually, that's a great segue to this question then. You've got these 3 different kinds of aircraft. Which ones lend themselves to which kind of missions? Because you mentioned, the different surveillance missions, pipeline integrity monitoring. You guys do specialized geomatics, all kinds of things. Is there one particular thing that lends itself more to, the helicopter is usually the way to go here, whereas the drone or the UAV is ideal for this scenario?
Yeah, so when it comes to the use of the Boreal laser for gas leak detection, it's definitely something that is best suited for a helicopter. Like
Is it because it's so big or something, or heavy?
it is. So the size of it, our development team has been looking at trying to shrink it down to get into that area where you can use it. But it's just with the entire chassis that would be required for it. I mean, it can't be used from a fixed wing standpoint, and so it lends itself to being used by a rotary aircraft fairly well. When it comes to missions that are better off for the drone, we do a lot of the geomatics works, lidar, site mapping, orthomosaic mapping, things like that from the lidar or from the drones. They really lend themselves to it. They're maneuverable, low cost to operate. You don't have to worry about gas and like making sure that those types of things. So we do have a fleet of drones that we use for those areas. We also have them equipped with thermal cameras for those kind of spot jobs that we would have where like sending out a helicopter probably isn't just necessary. So it's about choosing the right chassis for the right job. A lot of the longer lines that we do. So like I said, on a weekly basis, we go like straight across Western Canada for it. And those jobs are primarily done by fixed wing aircraft. They're a lot cheaper to operate. You can get the same job done with them. When it comes to more of our like gathering systems that we have, the more spider web approaches to it, then that's where the rotary aircraft comes into play.
I love how, this is Innovation Month, and I love how Synergy has incorporated UAVs into their kind of their skill set and their, aircraft fleet, because I think it was you, Craig, that mentioned in Clubhouse, oil and gas is a very conservative group of folks, right? I mean, it's a very conservative area, and probably rightfully so, because this is serious stuff. There are, dangers that can occur if you don't do things correctly. And oftentimes when people have a background in general aviation, they're very reluctant to add UAVs or to be involved with UAVs. And so I think it's great that Synergy has innovated and added this to the repertoire, because not everybody has, quite frankly, right, Craig? I mean, you were there walking the floor. I was surprised a little bit, because I had this idea that, oh, O&G, they're the early adopters. And I would say some of them are, and I think they're doing really well, the ones that have embraced drone technology, and not just kind of stuck with this is how we always have done it. But I don't know if you got this vibe, Craig, but the vibe I got from people were ground robots are the way to go. Maritime vehicles, to the extent something's underwater. Why? Because we don't have beyond visual line of sight regulations that get us where we need to go to have a full up scalable program. I don't know if you kind of saw that as you were walking around EDRC, but that was kind of the vibe that I got this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an interesting area that it's in because, like you said, like I really view oil and gas as being a very conservative industry. Like there's a lot of things that happen within oil and gas. That's the development of it. That's how it's happened. And then you also look at the aviation companies, and a lot of the aviation companies kind of look at drones a little bit wary. A lot of it is, like the capabilities that they have, but it's also the capabilities that they don't yet have that kind of have them shy away. Like they don't have the range, they don't have the lift, they don't have the kind of that feeling that you would get from having somebody in the actual cockpit to make those decisions rather than on the ground, like not directly involved. And so I find it super interesting when I'm going through and talking to the different people in the industry and who kind of is getting behind it and who is still a little bit skittish about the approach of it. Now, in saying that, even going back 5 or 6 years, I remember talking to colleagues and saying like, this is the next step to it. This is where we're going, right? And every time that, like at these conferences, like when we were in Houston, you could see that, they're right there, right? Like we're on the preface of something getting a lot bigger from that. Now, in saying that, like last year, Synergy flew. I think it was 1.2 million miles of pipe, pipeline right away inspection from
Wow.
it, and I don't think that that's going to be replaced anytime soon with it, just in the mass scale of things. But with some of the products that are out there, Volatus has the Air Report, like to have that drone in a box solution that they can deploy in certain areas for standard repeatable work. Like
Well, not only
that's going to
that,
be,
but you know what I was impressed about? First of all, the whole thing is impressive that their engineers created this thing very specifically for Canada's environment. Like,
yeah.
it's freezing up there. There were very, very specific operational requirements based on the environment that they tailored this air report for that others, there is really no equivalent. So I thought that was really interesting when I think I was talking to the crew there at AVSI Exponential that, they usually bring one of those out, and that's when I learned a little bit more about it. And Dean Attridge was also on this show back in January, talking a little bit about the air report and some of the other assets that Volatus has in there. I think they're calling it now the Volatus Sphere.
Yeah.
But that's a great maybe way to pivot into this question then, Craig, because what kind of drones, if you're at liberty to tell us, what kind of drones are you using? There's uh, I saw so many different ones on the floor, brand new ones, the people had just designed at EDRC, that one that like pivots on every angle. It was wild. To like, it had a little bumper on it too, for like going around the pipes and being inside and all kinds of things. You said you have a fleet of drones? Is it all different ones? Is it one particular manufacturer? Is it diversified? What are you using?
No, we've stayed with, from the beginning when we got them. We've stayed with a single manufacturer up to this point, and so we have M300s and M600s as our primary source. Now, one of the things that being Canadian, we don't have a problem with. We don't have a lot of pushback in using like Chinese manufactured drones in that way. So that's what we've used so far. Now, in saying that, like, yeah, as Synergy is part of the Volatus sphere, like we've been able to kind of tag on to some of the stuff that Synergy has done with some of their pilots and the different aspects that they have for it, and they've been using other aircraft for that kind of or like for those aspects. The thing that's really interesting to me, and what I'm always amazed about, is you go and you see that the envelope is being pushed in all the different directions, like you were saying. And like there was even a company that I spoke to when we were in Houston, and they're taking our 400s, which we operate from a manned perspective, hollowing them out and using them as drones, right? Like it's a full-sized helicopter that is now turned into a drone for those
Whoa.
purposes. And
Is this in
like
Canada, or are they doing that in the US? Because good luck getting
it's
those approvals.
yeah, so they're in the Northeast United States.
Whoa.
And
Okay.
so that being the next kind of step to that, it just looks at it, it blows my mind.
No, look, the military's been doing this forever, right? They convert a lot of older aircraft and just they call them drones, right? Because they use them literally for target practice. They'll fly those giant things remotely and then just blow them up with one of their, F-15s or something like that. But you're right. It's possible we're going to see larger and larger aircraft that are going to be uncrewed. That is, the next wave, I think. And so stay tuned for that. But from an innovation standpoint, you guys are doing so many different innovative things. What would you say when it comes to these pipeline inspections is maybe the most innovative thing that Synergy is bringing to the table?
We do a lot of work with our like with slope susceptibility, and so like movements in slope, like really any kind of terrain that you can imagine pipelines go through. Um, there's different areas that are more susceptible to to movements in the earth, and so through our slope susceptibility program, we started using publicly available maps from the Alberta regulator, um, overlaying them into areas where they determine to be high risk. We take those maps that they provide, overlay our clients' pipelines onto them, and then we're able to go and show them areas where we would consider that they would be high risk. Now, from that standpoint, to ensure uh, the stability of them, and we're able to go out and perform lidar and orthomosaic work on it to see if there's any movement in the ground. And so that kind of work can show them if there's going to be a landslide, if there's movement that they need to address. There's been some that, we've noticed erosion around plants, and, like the footings of the plants are, like fairly solid, but, like that movement in the earth is like could have a fairly drastic impact on the way that they operate. And so doing things like that, we're able to provide our clients with, like more of a proactive look at what they're actually doing. Back in um, uh, like going back to the pipeline surveillance, a lot of that is very reactionary. We're reacting to things that have already happened. This is
Right.
a way that we can kind of be on that front foot to look at it and say, here's problems that potentially could happen that you can mitigate before they happen, so that in 2 years, 3 years, they aren't a serious problem that could affect the integrity of the actual pipeline itself.
Well, as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I imagine, that kind of technology and analysis transfers into other industries as well. Construction comes to mind, engineering, departments of transportation. I mean, heck, I live in Colorado, and up I-70 on the way to the mountains, where everybody goes skiing. There's always rock slides.
Oh, yeah.
They're always closing down that one little highway, and that's like almost the only way to get there, right? At least right now, till we get eVTOL and advanced air mobility. That's like someday. But that's amazing. The preventive aspect of what you're doing. It's not only saving money, but what a safety thing that you're doing there. That's incredible. So I want to talk about what's new. you've got a lot going on. Synergy's been around since 2014. You guys have, flown millions and millions of miles of pipelines every year up in Canada. Drum roll, please, big announcement. So I hear there might be a move in the future.
Yeah, we're starting to stretch out into the United States, and so we have a customer that we're going to be working for that will start operations at some point in August, hopefully, depending on all the approvals and contracts and things like that. And then that's kind of the next step. It's like we think that we have a very special way to kind of communicate our data to our clients. So we have an online platform called AIRS, and it houses everything that we could possibly have, from the maps, the pipelines, the patrol reports, all of our pictures, the 360 imaging that we do, any LiDAR is all contained within that. And it's something that we, in our market research and looking, and from my personal experience in dealing with it from the other side and seeing the companies that operate, that just not very, there's no other company that can kind of compete with that. And so, with the changes that are happening within, within the United States, I think that the integrity aspect and the asset integrity is becoming a lot more the forefront on it. People are expecting companies that, like oil and gas companies, to be more of environmental stewards. It's becoming something that, is just a cultural shift. And bringing with that is more regulations and more rules and more oversight from, people like the EPA. And so with the methane compliance work this is stuff that's tried true within our industry that we are that we're very experienced in doing. And so kind of taking those steps, we can show what we have to offer in order to to provide a new market, really, in something that we've been doing for years in Canada.
Speaking of showing, I think we've got an image here related to some of the things that you can show clients. So tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so this would be some fugitive emissions mapping that we would do. And so within this, we would go and fly within a grid pattern for with our gas leak detection technology. And we're able to very, very clearly visualize the places that would be considered hot spots for methane in this case. So as you can see on the left-hand side there, the map that it shows, it has very clear areas where there's higher spikes of it. The parts per million in the bottom, you can see anything that's kind of that aqua color is 5 parts per million against the background around it, which is black. So there would be no meaningful amounts of methane for it. And then the right part, we can actually visualize the spikes in the different areas through.
Oh man, is that like little tiny red peaks on the far right top?
Yeah, for sure.
And so red usually means bad, right?
Yeah, red usually means bad. So that's the 3D visualizing mapping that we can do on these for these areas. And so this is an excellent tool that we have for that methane problem. Like we can visualize it. We can show our customers where the problems are. There's a lot of work being done within the space or within the methane space to make sure that there's controls put on it. There's satellite data out there that can be used. There's actual sniffers, so more handheld or truck mounted ones that can go through and detect methane. But we think from this area, not only do you see a mapping of where the problems are, but then you can actually visualize it to show what the actual impact would be in those specific areas to make sure that it's it's something that you can bring to an attention and show somebody rather than just saying that it's 5 part per million. It doesn't really mean anything at that point.
Well, and as you said, there's a little bit of a sea change when it comes to the regulations. The current administration is pushing through some new ones. We talked about it on your panel. I learned a lot, honestly, from not only you but your colleagues that were on that panel. This idea of third party reporting to the EPA, that's new, everybody. That's big. Like anybody could report now a potential leak or problem to the EPA that then has to be addressed. Is anything like that happening in Canada, or are you seeing kind of a little bit more of a push coming forward here in the US for that kind of compliance?
The compliance part is happening in Canada. So there's a couple different agencies that we deal with.
Yeah.
So there's the Orphan Wells Association, and so that's the abandoned wells that have been, the companies either just left them or they've gone bankrupt, and so they have
And
to.
that's a big methane issue too, right? They're just emitting, they're just, yeah.
Absolutely. And so, like doing work for them to try to work on the abandonment of them. But in the States, I think that there's um, the drive is coming from the federal level, where in Canada, like outside the provincial movements, it's not as big of an issue. The federal government in Canada offered quite a bit of money a few years ago. It was during COVID times, to work on, like the abandonment of them, but the identifying of methane and things like that haven't been really brought to the forefront. Where in the situation that we're talking about in the United States, like being able to walk down the pipeline right away, that's technically on your property, that, like they just have the lease to, and have a handheld detector and find methane, and then be able to report it, is something that we don't experience, and have it be actionable at that point. And so, like I think you phrased it really, really well in the panel that we did. It really is the methane problem, and from more than one aspect, not only from, like a community stewardship and being a responsible and respectful company within the area, but then also from the outside pressures that are coming in to make sure that it's addressed properly.
Yeah, Craig, because people that are not in the ONG industry may not appreciate there are a number of third-party nonprofit watchdogs, if you will,
Yeah.
that solely exist to track methane emissions. I know one of them actually put up a satellite or two for that very reason, and they have a public website like, oh, look at what's happening over here, and that gives added pressure. But no, it's interesting times. I think it's a great use of this technology. You guys are obviously experts in it and been doing it for a while. It's exciting that you're coming to the United States. And speaking of which, we're obviously here in the US. So when might we be able to see you in person again? You were just at the Energy Drone thing in Houston. Do you have any kind of upcoming events where folks might be able to meet you in person?
There's an asset integrity show in, I think it's the first week in September. It's the same week as the drone conference in Vegas. So I won't be at the drone conference in Vegas, but we'll be down in at the asset integrity show in Houston and the pipeline management to talk a little bit more about our products down there. So that's kind of the next step. And you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn or uh, LinkedIn, or just even send me an email.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what do we miss, Craig? Is there anything else you wanted to kind of cover before we get towards the end of the show? We've got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I mean, we have like some of the stuff that we're looking at from a drone perspective is really interesting to me and really, really exciting. Like walking around the show in Houston, you see the different applications that they have, and these, like, not only the tools that are available, or the actual drones itself that are available, but the applications that they're using them for. We've had conversations in the last little while with companies that are doing tank measurements through a drone, and it just presses up against the side of it, and this releases like a sound wave, and able to tell tank thickness. There's
And I imagine that could, I mean, I don't know. I imagine that could apply to pipes with the right technology somehow, because you're talking about the integrity and it's when it erodes that is the problem, right?
Yeah, the problem with that is generally they're underground, so it's a little harder.
Underground, so they
You
have to
have
be
to
like some miner. The
yeah,
underminer. Everybody out there developing technology, create the underminer.
yeah.
There you go.
The really interesting one we saw is there's some magnetromic work that's going on to like with depth of cover. Like it goes within our slope susceptibility programs where you can add that second layer to it of rather than just looking at what the ground is doing from the top from the lidar based data that you have, but then developing the depth of cover of the area too, to go if there was a landslide, this is what it would look like. You can do bend strain analysis to test the stress on the actual pipe itself. And so
Here's one I'll throw out at you. We actually had Dr. Jack Elston from Black Swift Technologies. They're out of Boulder, Colorado. And they created a soil moisture sensor that helps, detect soil moisture and relevant to erosion and things of this nature. So if you guys want to get connected, I'd love to introduce you. But
yeah, no,
and they
especially in
also
those
have a methane sensor for drones.
yeah, well,
They worked with another company and they're pushing into this methane sensor. They have the S2 drone that is built for like very kind of high, what's the word I'm looking for? High risk, crazy beyond visual line of sight operations. They've been operating in the Arctic and over volcanoes and in tornadoes, all kinds of things. So they've done extreme beyond visual line of sight and have now added these really cool sensors too. So I don't think Jack didn't make it to Houston, but I know he wanted to. He was out doing something, probably in the wild somewhere.
Yeah, that's the stuff that like it's where we're going. It's the direction that this industry is heading, and it's super exciting to see.
It is. It is. All right. With our couple minutes left, is there any? Do you have any closing thoughts, Craig, that you want to leave with the audience?
Like this kind of landscape that we work in and that we operate in from an oil and gas industry perspective. I mean, like there's a lot of eyes on making sure that like safe operations are had, and it's kind of offering something that is a high risk activity to improve safety is kind of a little bit out of the norm, but it's definitely something that like that I believe in, that like we're obviously capable of doing. And so like I like the slide at the beginning of it says it's this the sky is not the limit, it's where we get started, right? That's the point to it. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Craig, as you think about, one of the challenges for the entire drone industry, it's, still is public acceptance is up there on that list. But when you have use cases that are good for society, and in this case, one that can detect methane emissions, that can keep people safe, it's not something that a lot of people know about, but it is one of those, I think, that falls into that category. And so really important. I'm honored to be able to talk to you today and tell this story. I hope people, outside of our own industry watch it and can better appreciate the value that synergy, that drones and other forms of aviation are bringing every day to their lives. So thank you so much. And I guess that's all she wrote. So everybody, we are out here.